I couldn't help but notice the way he moved around the kitchen, casually chatting with his friends, laughing at jokes I barely heard. There was a certain confidence in him tonight, a relaxed charm that I hadn't seen in weeks, maybe months. I watched quietly from the doorway, pretending to busy myself with setting the table, but my eyes kept darting back to him. I knew this was just a dinner, a casual gathering, yet something in the energy of the room made my pulse quicken. I felt a mixture of anticipation and tension, an invisible line hovering between what was ordinary and what could become dangerously thrilling. He didn't notice me standing there, and that gave me a strange sense of freedom. I adjusted a glass on the table and smoothed a napkin absent-mindedly, though every small motion felt exaggerated under the weight of the room's subtle dynamics. The friends laughed, teasing him about stories from work, and he responded with a grin that somehow made my stomach twist. I felt an unfamiliar heat rising, a tiny thrill that I had buried beneath the routines of marriage. He was mine, yes, but he was also entertaining others, and I was beginning to wonder what it would feel like to step into that space in a way that went beyond polite hospitality. As I walked past him to serve a dish, I caught a glimpse of one of the friends glancing at me. A fleeting look, almost imperceptible, but enough to ignite a spark of curiosity and mischief inside me. I couldn't stop myself from holding his gaze just a second longer than necessary, letting my eyes linger, letting the air shift in ways I shouldn't. My hand shook slightly as I placed the plate down, and I told myself it was nothing, just nerves, but deep down I knew it was something far more dangerous. I was watching reactions, learning patterns, noticing who laughed a little too hard, who leaned a little closer than was appropriate. It was intoxicating that I wandered through the kitchen, pretending to check on the food, but my mind was calculating and observing. I thought about the evenings we'd spent together, the comfortable distance we'd settled into, and the contrast with tonight made me dizzy. There was a tension I hadn't felt in months, a sense that the rules were suspended, even if only slightly, and I felt a curious thrill at testing that line. I imagined what would happen if I let myself indulge in just a small secret transgression, how it would feel to tease, to draw attention subtly, and to see what unfolded next. I returned to the table with a calm exterior, carrying a tray of drinks, smiling politely as I handed them out. I could sense the undercurrent shifting, the energy in the room pulling slightly in my direction, and I told myself to stay composed, to act natural, yet every nerve in my body was alert, alive with anticipation. The laughter, the conversation, the seemingly casual interactions, they all felt like a stage, and I was beginning to understand that I could step onto it in ways that would surprise everyone, including myself. I had no idea exactly where the night would lead, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a dangerous kind of excitement, a thrill that promised something entirely unexpected. The room had shifted while I was walking back to the table, though no one spoke of it. I could feel the subtle glances, the slight pauses in conversation when my presence brushed against the edge of attention. It was almost imperceptible, but I noticed. The way one of his friends laughed a little too long at my husband's joke, then let his eyes drift in my direction. It was electric, a tiny spark that made my pulse skip. I felt the warmth creep across my skin, the kind that comes from knowing you are being watched, perhaps admired, even if just subtly. My hands trembled slightly as I poured another glass of wine, and I wondered if he noticed, if anyone noticed, but no one said anything. That silence, that weight of observation, drew me in even more. I caught my husband's eye from across the table. He smiled at me, polite and warm, and I returned it, but with a different kind of tension hidden behind my calm expression. I felt playful, almost dangerous, like I was balancing on the edge of a line I shouldn't cross. Each laugh, each movement of his friend's hands, each tilt of a head, it all seemed like it was meant to tease me without anyone admitting it. I adjusted my posture slightly, leaning just enough to brush against the edge of the table, feeling that small thrill of attention and imagining what could happen if I let it grow. My mind raced, calculating, daring, wondering how far I could push this without anyone realizing. The way they all spoke, the way they leaned toward my husband when he told a story, made me feel invisible at first and then incredibly noticed. I realized I had a choice. I could continue as the quiet, composed wife, or I could step into the unspoken energy in the room and see what it would feel like to be desired in a way I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. I let my fingers trail over the edge of the wine glass, slowly, deliberately, noticing how one of the friend's eyes followed the motion. My heart raced. The simple act of holding someone's gaze, letting them think I was aware of them, filled me with an unexpected power. Every small interaction now felt charged. I leaned slightly toward a friend when passing the appetizer, letting my hand brush lightly against his, casual but intentional. He caught it, the movement lingering in a fraction longer than necessary, and I felt a thrill that was electric and dizzying. My husband was distracted, laughing and gesturing with another friend, oblivious to the subtle dance unfolding across the table. My mind raced with possibilities, imagining what might happen if I let the tension grow. If I let the glances, the subtle touches, the unspoken curiosity take over for just a few moments. I knew it was dangerous. I knew it was forbidden. And yet I couldn't stop myself from leaning into the feeling, tasting it, letting it tease me like a flame that promised both warmth and danger. I excused myself to refill glasses, deliberately moving slowly, letting my presence be felt, watching reactions. Every glance in my direction, every small shift in posture, every fleeting smile. It fed the hunger building inside me. I felt alive, awake in a way I hadn't in months, caught between the thrill of being desired and the intoxicating possibility of what might come next. The night was no longer just dinner. It had become a subtle game, a tension-filled dance where each unspoken moment held the power to change everything. I felt a thrill surge through me as I returned to the table, carrying another tray of drinks. The air felt different now, heavier, charged with anticipation I hadn't noticed before. Every glance, every subtle movement from the friends, seemed to be directed at me, though no one dared say anything. I could feel it, the quiet awareness, the tension stretching across the room like a taut wire. My husband was still laughing, distracted, leaning into the stories his friends were sharing, completely unaware of the undercurrent that was shifting right under his nose. I smiled politely, but inside my heart was pounding, my mind racing with possibilities I had never imagined. As I handed a glass to one of the friends, our fingers brushed lightly, intentionally. He lingered for a second, and that slight contact, so simple yet loaded with meaning, sent a shiver down my spine. I noticed my husband had turned to answer a question from another friend, giving me the perfect moment. I didn't have to think. Instinct took over. I leaned just a little closer than necessary, letting my presence press against his shoulder, feeling the subtle energy of the room intensify. Every muscle in my body was alive, every sense heightened. The quiet thrill of crossing the invisible line made me giddy and terrified at the same time. The friend's eyes met mine, and for a moment the world narrowed to just the two of us. A small smile, almost imperceptible, passed between us, a shared understanding that was electric, dangerous, and exhilarating. I could feel the tension in the room shift, though outwardly everything remained casual, polite. I took a sip of my own wine, deliberately slow, letting him watch the motion, letting the curiosity build. My mind was sharp and daring. I knew exactly what I was doing, and yet it felt like stepping off a cliff, not knowing how far the fall might take me. The unspoken dance continued, subtle gestures, fleeting touches, and glances that spoke louder than words ever could. I allowed myself a small, controlled movement, a brush of my hand along the table, a slight tilt of my body, just enough to make him aware, just enough to let the unspoken possibility hover between us. I could sense my husband's attention elsewhere, giving me the freedom to explore this dangerous thrill, a silent game of temptation and restraint that electrified every nerve in my body. I could feel the power of it, the intoxicating control, and the undeniable allure of stepping into a space I had long avoided. The climax of the night didn't need words. It was in the lingering touch, the breath held just a second too long, the way I allowed my gaze to meet his for a heartbeat that felt like eternity. It was the thrill of crossing a line without anyone openly acknowledging it, the excitement of knowing that a single choice could shatter or transform everything. My heart raced as I stepped back subtly, letting the tension linger, leaving everyone guessing, leaving the possibility of discovery suspended in the air. I had acted just enough to ignite the unexpected, to take control of the moment, and yet nothing had been said. The room felt charged, silent in its own way, and I realized I had unleashed something I couldn't easily contain, a dangerous spark that would linger long after the evening ended. The evening wound down, the laughter fading into quiet murmurs, the clinking of glasses slowing as plates were cleared. I leaned back slightly, letting the tension of the night settle like a soft fog over the room. My heart was still racing, every nerve buzzing from the daring game I had just played. I caught glimpses of my husband laughing at something one of the friends said, completely unaware of the subtle storm that had passed beneath his notice. The thought made me shiver, both from the thrill of secrecy and from a small, almost guilty satisfaction. I had crossed a line, just enough to ignite curiosity, to taste temptation, but without anyone knowing outright did I move through the room with calm composure, serving dessert, refilling drinks, offering smiles that seemed natural but were laced with hidden meaning. Every subtle gesture, every lingering glance I allowed, carried the weight of what had just happened. I could feel it in the air, the unspoken acknowledgement that something had shifted, though no one dared name it. The friends were chatty, animated, yet their glances occasionally drifted toward me, just a fraction too long. My husband, blissfully unaware, leaned back in his chair, smiling and making jokes, completely oblivious to the tension I had created and controlled. Once the plates were cleared and the last sips of wine taken, I retreated slightly, letting the energy of the night settle into a comfortable quiet. I felt the lingering warmth of power, of knowing I had stirred something, and the awareness that the evening had changed me in ways I hadn't expected. It wasn't guilt exactly. It was a mix of curiosity, exhilaration, and a secret thrill I had kept entirely to myself. I allowed myself a slow, deep breath, letting the adrenaline ebb but keeping the memory vivid. Every glance, every touch, every moment of unspoken daring played over in my mind, like a secret replay I could savor endlessly as the night came to an end, and the friends left with polite goodbyes and lingering smiles. I noticed my husband finally turning toward me with a relaxed, satisfied expression. He didn't suspect a thing, and that realization brought a rush of both triumph and quiet amusement. I carried the secret with me, a small flame of power that danced just beneath the surface. It wasn't about betrayal exactly. It was about reclaiming a spark of life, curiosity, and desire that had faded under routine. I had tested boundaries, indulged in a fleeting thrill, and emerged unscathed yet transformed in subtle, undeniable ways. Sitting alone afterward, the house quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the clock, I reflected on the night. The unexpected excitement, the unspoken tension, the dangerous playfulness. It had awakened something in me that I hadn't realized I'd been missing. I thought about the choices I had made, the thrill of daring without exposure, and the delicate balance of secrecy and empowerment. I smiled softly, knowing that the memory would linger, a quiet, intoxicating reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary moments are the ones carefully hidden in plain sight. And though the world outside remained unchanged, inside me, something had shifted, leaving me alive in ways I hadn't expected, leaving me with a secret no one else would ever understand but me.